When I am near you any place, my senses always long to bless your spirit shining through your form, your body eloquent through your dress. I love vibrations of your voice. They have a magic that will snare my soul as when your laughter spills silver to peal upon the air. You set all common things aglow in Eden. You create anew till my adoring spirit finds the world abbreviated in you.
There is an eye behind all of this, the image of sight setting all, setting as in jewels in order to the streets and footsteps so that each is different and seen by the one, all being gazed at with the look that it needs. Icons of actions, statue of deed, the world man made, a mirror of need.
T Street, man, mean and bad. Turn green, green grass, gold, gone ash. Palm sweat, jazz sings through things in the mind. The balance of mood on sensate logic, lodged carefully, cornered capriciously to cream off the head like steam or smoke of blood.
Lights flash, green, yellow, red, flash, even night flesh. Skid row, boats and cars collide, siren wails, hails unseen action. Skid kids squeal for real, heat, nightmares gallop by, gone. Silver lightning cycles, screams on, careens on, down deep black macadam street, night, tearing through a street fight on Avenue D. Zigzag, knife, street, blood, meat, exploding fiery chrome blades, spattering storefront windows red, cracking glass, clink heads clean open, gut-wrenching a front in front, heavy metal kids roll like rocks and break with a thud so sudden and sharp on Midnight City butcher blocks.
Street corner Daedalus handed you wings in a nickel bag, with no words about flying too close to the sun.
Over the worn face of my mind, echoes straining iron wheels of a train, going nowhere. Chattering about, I get the feeling I've left something important behind. A bum's wish. Heroes dream of bravery, a naked lover. Like insects, eyes pass the houses. Myriad, yet set apart, moves quietly this land. To the coastline of Massachusetts, fenced fringes of Tuxedo Park.
All aboard.
A train going nowhere.
The boy with the haunted eyes, roaming barefoot through the depot in midwinter, stares ahead, oblivious to the crowd pushing by, seeing just his own world. I saw him twice, on the day I arrived and the next week when I left. Everyone needs a place to call home.
People sit in subways like stones along the beach, faces hid in crusty sand with eyes that do not speak. Bundles clutched, the drowning hands, gray clams shot out of reach. Glances cast like hopeful nets are cut among the reefs. Something negative rocks these cars. Stone passengers do not feel a coldness fierce and frightening, lies hissing with the wheels. Drops of sweat left at the woodblock, axe head 3 inches deep, handle halfway up.
Dawn to dreaming in new-cut ryegrass, open lips stained by June strawberries, where the flying grasshopper turns my dreaming eyes above the scalloped trees.
Legs gone dancing in the cloud puffs, across stone fences past frost's apple trees, willingly half lost within the sun's golden cage.
As it turned out, no boats had come into the government wharf at Mabu, so Fulty took us further down to Port Hood for the fish. The Bishop brothers had harvested a good load of hake from the Gulf, the haddock having been long gone, exiled from the sea by the big draggers of the Russian ships that had scraped the floors with iron claws to count every morsel of fish and seaweed beneath. The day was cold, rainy, pitiless. Some restless waves were breaking along the shale cliffs of Port Hood Island across the inlet. The dock was raw, but the Bishop brothers were smiling. They had left their nets out over the weekend, gone home to Cape Lawrence to drink Moosehead ale and maybe stumble into church on Sunday. Then today, Monday, they returned to pick up their nets that were full of hake and a few lonesome mackerel. These were the ones who were the sacrifices for the rest of the sea creatures who remained unscathed. These were the hake of bad fortune, the lingerers, the trusting, the easily tempted and of course the saviors. Now the losers would be made into food for a civilization which they were only vaguely conscious of. The hake were sprawled out on the deck like a single sorrowful creature on a weather-beaten Devonport. Fulty was arguing with the heavier-set bishop brother over the price of £100. They settled on 6 cents a pound. I preferred not to take part in this bargaining for souls. Instead, I stood sheepishly on the other side of the massacre by an old Jewish man from Quebec. "Turned a little cool," he said, while his yashika camera flapped off a pot-belly's stomach. I nodded in agreement and looked at the pile of hake, thousands of them, each with eyes like Kennedy half-dollars. The hake I would like to think to be fish of vision, with eyes that could pierce the future like prophets and politicians. Or were they really the same visionary cow eyes of prophets and politicians and great North American industrialists, merely capable of divining a stale crust of order in the political chaos? Whatever their vision, they ended up on this dock in a great heap. The sad part for me was that I was unable to detect if they were yet living or long dead. My own eyes were watering from the salt wind. The Jewish man tried several times to light a half-consumed cigar, while his legs, exposed in Bermuda shorts, erupted in a flock of purple goose pimples. This, I suppose, was the only eulogy that the hake would get. A strange thudding sound had begun. I turned to silently watch the final rites of the Hake massacre. Carl Bishop, like a Canadian Neptune, was in fluid motion with a device that looked like a Triton. He'd casually lunge it into a fish or two, and heave them onto the cutting table, where his 2 brothers in rubber overalls were gutting the fish. This is a sort of surgical task, involving the tearing of the organs from the body with a swift jerk of the hand. They would slice the fish down the middle and grab a handful of various organs, then slop them into a crate. The rest of the fish were loaded into wooden boxes that were quickly loaded into a refrigerated truck. From then on, the fish would see a winter like they had never seen before. Their entrails, however, were sent off to Truro to be made into fertilizer. The head stayed with the body until some point later, where they would be removed to create dog food or experiments for biology students. The fishermen were smiling, absently discussing their good fortune and the faults of women. The hake, however, were silent, their faces contorted in a gamut of surrealistic frowns and grimaces, but also a few ironic smirks, a grin and even a yawn. Meanwhile, their bodies were being torn asunder. There were no women on the dock, but a few of the local boys had abandoned their bicycles in a nearby ditch, so they could come near the tables and watch the guts spill into the wooden tubs. One boy with fiery red hair smiled at a particularly large fish, liver, plopped dramatically into a massive intestine. There was no overpowering smell of death present, as there would have been at a slaughterhouse, just a few weathered fishermen performing an ancient universal task, and hoping they would make it home in time for supper. I was most aware of the sound of the death of hake. It caught in the back of my ears like a fishbone in the throat. It wasn't so much the sound of the trident plunging into the carcass, but more like the sound of eyes scanning blank walls for answers. The death of hake is not like an abandoned automobile grown over with weeds and raspberries. It's the opposite. At any rate, this was a new and alien scene before me. In fact, I was more familiar with a Vietnamese village burning and frightened Asian faces than the lowly trauma of a fish captured in midlife in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Therefore, I was not ready to throw myself before the spiked prongs to end the bloodshed like an impromptu savior. And there was still the fact that I couldn't tell if the fish were yet alive or long since dead, discouraged of the traps of life like a Manhattan subway patron. So I merely remained a spectator of the annulment of life. Fulty, my Scotch miner friend who had brought us here, was trading some sort of gossip with Carl Bishop, and finally tucked a few Canadian bills in the fisherman's flannel shirt pocket, so as not to besmear the Queen's portrait with fish blood and sperm. Fulty then hefted the large wooden box toward the trunk of our Toyota. I walked over to help like the Good Samaritan, only I was aiding the guys who beat up the poor foreigner instead of bandaging his wounds. Kindness is a very relative thing, I consoled myself. Meanwhile, the old Jewish man was taking a picture of a bucket of entrails and one of Carl Bishop in the midst of gutting a hake. The wind came up stronger off the late sea, and daylight was remembered only by the cloth-like drizzle embracing the refrigeration truck. It became my job to lift each gutted fish out of the crate and place it in a green plastic garbage bag that Fulty held open. One by one I picked them up, the ravaged foreigners. Blood and slime dripped down my sleeves to my elbows. Some ragged bones poked through fish flesh and jabbed at my hands like a futile last attempt at self-defense. But more probably this was not truly the case. I doubt that the hake begrudged their crucifixion, at least not toward me personally. After we were done, I rubbed the slime between my palms and went looking for a stream in which to wash off the blood and guilt. The fish brooded silently in the trunk of the Toyota, and Fulty headed us back north on Route 19 toward Inverness. On the way home, we stopped to visit our Mother of Sorrow shrine. This was a small Catholic chapel on the grounds of a Jesuit-run home for the mentally retarded. The shrine was a local tourist attraction, complete with a wooden plaque with a poem that stated that we were all really only tourists in this world anyway. Despite the fact that Fulty claimed to have been dislodged from God by his activities in the Canadian coal boom towns, he was a former Catholic and thought it would be appropriate for us to pay our respects. The grounds were very well kept, manicured to perfection in the way that only a slow and patient thinker could have accomplished. The whole place was a monument to sorrow, and the fish no doubt were cognizant of it, smelling each other's insides and reverberating death beneath the Japanese metal. The inside of the chapel was lit by a multitude of candles. The walls were beautiful oaken beams, interrupted only by wood-laced stained glass windows. A gaudy statue of the Mother of Sorrow herself was in the front of the room. On her lap was the old Fisher of Men. Both were painted as if from by a paint-by-number set in deep, vivid colors. Mary, in all of her sorrowful glory, was robed in vibrant blue and green. Christ, except for his purple robe, hung naked across her lap with a massive bloody wound in his side. We were the only ones in the room to gape at the spectacle. Fulty put $1 in the collection box and pushed a button marked Press for Music. The choirs of a dilapidated RCA tape machine whirled into action. The melancholy music elevated the vision of Christ, who was draped across his mother in such agony and woe. Some sort of automatic lighting slowly brightened the stage, bringing out the shiny flesh, as if it were that of a Vargas girl. The all too vivid wound made me think of the Hague massacre. I wondered if they could hear the celestial choirs echoing from the chapel, or did they hear the ancient music of their Galilean ancestors hauled from the very watery domain by Andrew and Peter? Or were they oblivious to fishermen? Do fishermen turn disciples or prophets that their larger brothers swallowed? Christ himself lay up there gutted, only he had this memorialized opportunity to lie forever in his mother's arms. The Hague could only lie in a state in a metallic machine from a faraway sea nation. Fulty made the sign that Catholics do, like an itch-in for spots or a signal to God of where it hurts most. A small sign at the door begged the visitor to push another button to stop the music. As I did so, the choirs slowed to a halt, not all at once, but like a sailing ship in a slowly diminishing wind. Their celestial craft bumped against the shore of the real world. Somewhere in silence, the choir waited patiently by the beach, waiting for other tourists to gaze for a moment or two at the sorrowful mother's face and mankind's salvaged hulk of a savior. We elected not to stop by the Mother of Sorrow gift shop, but drove down the well-kept drive past the home. Men and women swayed back and forth on swings and lounged gracelessly in doorways. Fulty's $1 would by no doubt buy several pounds of fish to feed these gentle people. Back at Fulty's house, we partook of one slaughtered hake, weighing about 3 pounds. We ate in the kitchen where the steam from the boiling fish stuck to windows and eyes. My feelings were mixed. I ate the sacrament, the white, tender flesh of the boiled hake. The fish is only a substance, I said to myself, food for a meal, nourishment, and not the raw, sad eyes of a dying victim caught with only the excuse that he wished to live his life from beginning to end. I ate with only a twinge of intellectual remorse. So, too, the sliver of a tasteless wafer once placed on my tongue had not seemed or felt like the body of a fallen and risen Savior. The sacrifices that are made are really noticed, but even if noticed, rarely felt. My short reverie over the matter came to a close. Fulty, with mouth full to overflowing with fish and potatoes, turned to me like an unfrocked priest and said, "Eat all ye of it. There's plenty more in the pot."
The word dumb, being a single word, translucent, cross-warped, charged with various associations, could, from a smattering of other languages, coinciding in a multifaceted mosaic glow, an underlying nature of the human universe, has a suffix in English, a state or fact of being, from the Latin domus, meaning home. Slavic languages say dama, meaning home. German and French have dam and dome as cathedral. Take your pick. The long, unformed days of floating expectancy drawn up into a sense by the foibled version of propagated existence. A day slowly built up from sun-baked dew, slowly as a carpenter's measurement, slowly given sequence, preference, ordered. Timorous maze vaulted with crickets and pine breeze, well-worn naves of pathways, bus stops, aspiring skyscrapers etched through insanities, the pilgrimage to alleys and homes, lived in and through, to a cuneiform puzzle once again. The dew settling down, nightgrass rivers itself back across plains and footholds, tapped gently round the toes that posed prior reposing footprints wetly painting sun-warmed rocks, feet washed clean by tall grass, bedded down, moon ascends impartial, impious, impatient, also impishly contrived, night turns alive, shadows dancing and diving, flying off into eventually slumber. We come close to that instant, thumbing through all this as we step between echoes of a bell and silent mountains. Stepping lightly, we pass close. At times our tread is soft as fallen birch leaves, rained on and blessed by spotted sunlight. The forest is always there, maybe jungled in concrete grayness, yet the sap is flowing, forever tapped and used, honeyed, packaged, and we miss it, or so we think.